Hi everybody, my name is Andre and welcome to my stream. It's day 13 of my React app development. To remind you what I'm working on, I'm working on a text encryption app. Here is current progress. We have here 3 panels. Input panel, where user can enter anything they want to transform. Currently only AES encryption is supported, but there will be more. Then user selects encryption, specifies encryption parameters, and then here we can see the output. So actual logic is not yet ready. What I did is set up React app, connect it to Redux, did some design to create transforms, you see. But actual logic is not ready, and today I actually planned to work on it. Here is my Trello tickets for today. So there are 3 tickets which are related. 2 of them are related to filling out key and IV inputs with default values. Here, when we select AES encrypt, there should be some default random key here. And here also we should see some random IV. And third ticket is related to seeing the result of the transform in the output panel. Now, first of all, when user loads our app, they already see some example text, right? So there should be already something in the output, even if we have none transform by default. I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, even if we have none transform by default, then this text should be turned basically into the same text, and we should see the same in the output. So that's the first step, I would say, to make sure that input is somehow transformed into output. Just make a transformer for the none option. So what I would do is to write Cypress Test. For this first I'm using Cypress as my testing framework. Here, let me start Cypress. I think it's not started yet. I only started React, but I haven't started Cypress. Yarn Cypress open. Okay, while it's starting, I can actually add a Trello ticket for that. Add card 26. I think 26 when the page loads, user should see output text area. Should see same text in the output text area as in the input text area. So when page loads, basically output and input text should be the same. So that's what I would check first with my Cypress test. So with Cypress we're using cy.get to get our element, and here we provide CSS Selector for the element which we want to get. The element which we want is the input and input and output text areas. So this text area, which has TRS text area, and this text area, where is the output? Output is here, and this text area. They both have classes text area. However, above them there is a parent with different class TRS output panel, and I think this one is TRS input panel. So we can do it like this. Remember how we select element which is a parent of another element. We first start with parent, so this will select just the input panel element. Sorry, this selector will select just this element. Then we add a space and we add child selector. For example, child class. Child class, we have here TRS text area, right? So since this is a class, it should start with dot TRS text area. Okay, so this will select text area of the input panel. I can say should have text, and our default text is lorem ipsum $sit amet. $sit amet. This is actually a gibberish. It doesn't mean anything, but it's a Latin-like text which is used to fill something with the text when you need to fill just for test purposes with some text. People usually use lorem ipsum. This is some broken Cicero phrase, but it doesn't really mean anything in Latin. So lorem ipsum $sit amet. This is our default text, so we can say here we expect it to have this text, and the output panel we also expect to have this text. Let us now check this in Cypress, how this test runs. Okay, first should succeeded because input really has this text lorem ipsum $sit amet, and the second failed just as we expected. So let's now write code to make this test pass. I would start with the ReadUser. I think we should go to the ReadUser. Okay. So when text changes, we should send some action here to the ReadUser. But here we already actually setting this input to some text. So to make this pass, we just set input and output to the same. So this does not really need any changes. Okay, but however, we are not setting output in our component, in the output panel component. Here we have text area, but we don't set value to the value of the state, and actually we don't even export the state here. We don't even import the state from Redux. So that's what we need to do. I could use my snippet to, it will add a bit more than we need, but still. Output panel. So this I need to add. This snippet creates a whole component, but we already have part of the component, so that's why I thought maybe it's not a good idea to do that, but I think we should be fine. Cannot find name output panel component. Yeah, it's just output panel, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Now we connected it to Redux using connect. To learn how to connect to Redux, there is an earlier stream about that, I think day 6 or day 5, so somewhere around that time I am showing how to connect to Redux. Now that we connected output panel to Redux, we want our state here. So this state will be in the props, right? So now we set value of the text area to the value received from the state, props state output. So this is our output which we set in the ReadUser here. But neither output nor input actually change in Redux currently. So when changing the text, nothing will really change. Okay, sorry. So it should be output panel component after all. I'm changing the name because somewhere it is imported and there it has name output panel component instead of just output panel, so that's why I'm changing these naming conventions here and here. Yeah, now let's see what's happening. Okay, this error card cannot find name output panel base. I think it might just be, let me add dot only. If you add dot only after it in pretty much any testing framework, be it Mocha, be it Cypress, be it Jasmine, this will run just this test of the whole suite. So so it can't even get TRS out panel. I misspelled class name. It should be output panel. Yeah, now it's succeeding. So this test completed successfully. Now let's go to the next test. So I will move this to done. When an element is selected. No, not this one. I think this one I'll start. When the user changes text in the input text area, the user should immediately see the result of transforming this text using the transforms from the transforms panel. That is, if I change input, output should also change. If we don't have any transform, then text should just match the transform. So that's what I will do now. First we add a test, and then we start coding. This is the most important principle of test-driven development. However, I find myself not always doing like this, but this is the right way. When the user changes text in the input text area, so let's just take this input text area. I think 26 better come before 21 actually. And with Cypress it is very easy to add additional text. You just use .type and you type what is the continuation of lorem ipsum $sit amet, because I don't remember lorem ipsum $sit amet. Okay, lorem ipsum $sit amet consectetur idpis king elite. Consectetur idpis king elite. Okay, consectetur idpis king elite. We will type this, and then we make sure that output text panel also has this continuation. Let us look at Cypress tests. Okay, you see, it just typed this text. Now it's checking if output also has this, but output does not have it. Why? Because we don't really do anything to change this. So let us check our ReadUser. I will make text bigger for people who are using mobiles. So here we have input received event, and we assign this input to our input in this state, right? And we don't do anything else. But what we would want to do, we would want to actually call some function like encode output equals some encode function, which we don't yet have. Action data new input, which will take the following arguments. We're doing now this very functional programming, like very functional programming. Encode, first argument we give them input, and the second argument we give them all our transforms. Again, new state transforms. Good idea to actually give them, instead of our real transforms, give them a copy of it, so that if they somehow change it, this does not, it should not change it normally, but just in case. So we are not providing the same object as the argument to this function. Okay, so we are calling encode, but we don't have this encode function, right? So that's what we need to implement now, this encode function. I would create encoders, and Encode TS. And here I would have this Encode function, which takes input as first argument and then transforms, which is an array of transform data, as the second argument, and it returns it can return a string, but we need to understand that after encoding, usually what you get is bytes. So if we're returning this as a string, not as a binary, then we need to understand in which format we return it. So I would suggest to return just the node buffer object. I think this will be fine. Yeah, buffer. However, to use buffer, we need to import it. I think like this. Import buffer. Now we get input and transforms, and we return a buffer. Depending on transform type, encoder will vary. So we should have an encoder for each transform type. Let's say AS encrypt TS. This will be the encoder for AS encrypt export function. AES encrypt encoder for each. Okay, so what is it going to take? It's going to take same as any encoder. I think I can define encoder function here. Something like export encode type. This will be basically encode function type, and returns buffer. No. Okay, export type. I think like this, yes. Encode function. Then I can just call this encode function. No, I think this is not necessary then. Okay, so input transforms and buffer. Same thing with AES encrypt. Okay, so now to encrypt a string, we could use node scripter module. So first we import node module. We can import built-in node modules if you created your app with if you created your React app with create React app, then you can just import node modules like this. Just import crypto. So now when you want to do something and you don't know how, you just Google this crypto node.js, and here you will find, of course, how to do these things. I already know how to do this, but I don't completely remember the API. So what I want is the AES encryption. So for this I need to create a cipher object. Yeah, I need to create cipher object. But there are some options, right? But these options should be inside the transforms. Yeah. Anyway, here we can create cipher like this. Algorithm will depend actually on what we specified in our AES input, which means here. Okay, now it won't compile, of course, but it will depend on what user specified. But let's say AES, we'll try this one. Then key we should also get, and IV, but let us pause AES encoder for a second and just add non-encoder, which should be for a default situation when we haven't selected any encoder yet. So export function, non-encode, or I can actually call it encode. This would be fine because they're all in different files anyway. It would take input, transform data, and yeah, I think transform we only need our current transform for this. Buffer. So non-encoder will not do anything, it will just return input. That's why it's non-encoder. But however, here we return a buffer. Import buffer, so we should create a buffer instead. For this you can use buffer from, this is again node's buffer object. So you can check here how to use it. So there are several ways of using it. Buffer from, string, encoding. That's what we need. Buffer from, string, and encoding, we will have UTF-8. From input and encoding, UTF-8. So it takes input and returns same string but as a buffer. So now let's return to our encode function. So we check each transform we have here. We can use for of here. You can use for of loop to loop through arrays like this. or like this. I think you can also do this. So this will take every element from the array and call this code on it. So result of the encoding should be, so this now it will depend on actual transform. So we could do here a switch depending on transform type. We can check now transform type none. We'll call our case none. We'll call our non-transform, which we will encoder, which we encode, which we will import from non-encoder. What function encode? Import declaration conflicts with local. Okay, right. Encode as non-encode, or maybe encode none. Since we already have encode defined here, we can't have another function also named encode. That's why you need to export it with another name. So result encode none. Here we have input. Okay, input should be a string. Actually, I think we'll have to change that. Input should be also a buffer. In this case, we won't need to transform actually also. So yeah, here we did not import transform data. Yeah, you see, I didn't import transform data, that's why it was underlined. And then we just return same thing. Why we want buffer as the input? Because we'll have multiple transforms one after another. So we will want input as the buffer. Let data as buffer. So here instead we will create buffer immediately in the first encode function. Actually, this is not guaranteed to be UTF-8 because remember, user sets up encoding, but let us assume that it's UTF-8 for now. So encode none. We provide data and current transform. No, I think data equals. So basically it will run each transform on data, and then this data will be the result of the encoding, which we return. Right? Okay, so now we have our encoder. Here I should specify encoding. So let me add encoding actually here. What? Okay. It's not a subnet of array buffer or shared array buffer. No, no, no. That's a different overload. Why are you saying this? UTF-8 base 64 or hex. What about this? Okay. Now this should be fine. So we'll have three possible encodings anyway. It's either UTF-8, which is text, base 64, which is binary represented by 64 string symbols, and hex, which is binary represented by 16 alphabetic characters. So let's go here now. Let's import this encode function, which we just created. Import encode from encoders encode. Now what we have, new input. I will set this to UTF-8 by default, and const encoded data. So now this is our buffer, which is encoded data. Now we need to transform it into encoding user wants in the output. However, we do not yet save this in Redux. So let's again assume that user will want UTF-8. So you are using toString, and here you specify encoding you want, which is UTF-8 in our case. Property output does not exist. Yeah, it should be output. I missed T. Okay, so now I think our test 21 should succeed. Yeah, somehow something failed. Import crypta cannot find name transform data. Alright, this is AES encrypt. We don't really need this AES encrypt though, because it's not yet doing anything. But I did not transform data. It's complaining that I did not import transform data. So it should... No, it's not. It should offer me to import it. Okay, now it's offering. Buffer, actually I will just remove this. I don't see any point because I'm not using this anyway currently. Something is wrong. Cannot find name transform data, still in AES encrypt. Okay, I think it did not really. Let me just make it run just this test. Yeah, now it's good, I think. But still, it's I don't get it. Cannot find name transform data in AES encrypt. Let me just remove that file for a second. AES encrypt. This one, I don't really need this now anyway. Why would I need it? Let me try restarting this thing. Cypress. Okay, let me actually check it in actual app. Something weird happening. So let me restart both Cypress and the app. This sometimes happens actually, although I think it recompiled several times. Let's try again. Yeah, I think now it's fine. No issue there. No. Yeah, no issues coming now. So now you see output has the same text as the input. Although we didn't really do any transforms yet. Let me see how much time is remaining. Actually, it's 40 minutes, so it's like 20 more minutes, I think. I think I might have time to do AES encryption too. Let me first start with saving encoding to Redux, because I'm not keeping this information selected encoding. I don't really keep this information in Redux currently. Okay, so now you see it's this test is succeeding, so everything is working. Okay, what have I just done? Okay, I did this. So what I want now, I want to store encoding information in Redux, which I don't do yet. So let's start with the input panel component. Here I have encoding drop-down components, right? I think this is the component which we should call when option changes. However, we need to call it from here. So I need to pass an onChange function and properties. And this thing does not even have properties, so I would define props first. Coding drop-down props. And the only prop I currently need I could pass it on change. This is one way of doing this. And then I can call this on change from here. Other way would be to pass some ID to the encoding drop-down component. And then send action from this component itself. These are two options. I think I'll go with the first one, on change. Let me check first this native select documentation in material UI. Native select. This one should have some on change or something. Yeah, here. On change, callback function fired when a menu item is selected. Signature function event object returns void event. The event source of the callback, you can pull out the new value by accessing event target value. So same thing as usual. Okay, so value string, I think, and it returns void, so it doesn't return anything. Encoding drop-down props. Encoding drop-down props. And here we will call on change. So on change will call our own on change. Native selects on change will call our own on change props. On change, here we'll have event target value with the new value. So it has these options: UTF-8, base64, and hex. All right. it will call this on change, which we provide to it. And here on change, what are we gonna do? We are gonna send Redux action on encoding change new encoding. So this function we will call when encoding changes, that is inside of this on change callback. Encoding, and it will dispatch a Redux action which I need to create in my list of actions, which will be input encoding changed. And I immediately going to add output encoding change, because that's what I will surely need. Yes, so I'm sending actions input encoding changed data new encoding. Okay, now we can handle this in the ReadUser. But before that, I will immediately change in the output panel, because now output panel also will require changes, because it won't run without onChange function anymore, because I added it to the props. Immediately we will add here encoding change. So on change we will call props on encoding change with the value. Same thing in the input panel. On change props I think I still need to edit here in the props. Yes, I need to do it twice, because first this is the interface where it's defined in the props, and second of all where it is actually created in the object. That's why we need to do it twice in TypeScript. And new encoding is this value. Okay, this is going to send these actions, which is input encoding changed, and it should be output encoding change here. Output encoding changed. So let's now open the ReadUser. So case actions input encoding changed. it sometimes makes sense to have multiple reducers if you have a real big app handling everything inside of a single switch case is not a very good idea. Or also you could have multiple handlers for different message types. So you can have a separate function for every handler. Usually people use combine reducers to combine many reducers, and that and then return a result in a single state. But I think for this app, one reducer is enough. Input encoding changed. So let's first of all, do we store anywhere input encoding? No, we don't store anywhere input encoding, output encoding. So let's do it like this: input encoding UTF-8, output encoding output encoding also UTF-8. This will be the default encoding. What is the problem here? Yeah, we need to change this state. Input encoding string. The input encoding should be UTF-8 or hex or base 64, because this will be all the encodings we currently support. Output encoding. We can even define it as export encoding type. So that if later we want to add another encoding, this will be easy. Output encoding, input encoding. Yeah, actually someone wrote something in the chat, actually 2 people. Hi guys. I didn't notice it, probably they already left by now. So one of them says never done JS, but this is actually not JS, this is TypeScript, but this is not much different from JS. So if you've never done JS, it's good to, I think, to watch some tutorials. Free Code Camp has a nice channel with many tutorials. So okay, input encoding changed. So here we want to assign this encoding. To what we receive in the action data, new encoding. I think it's like this, right? Okay, but no matter that I change it, still same will do with output encoding. I also need to provide this from the Redux state to you know what. To actually where this is shown, that is inside the component. So let's check first. Transforms panel, no, not this one, input panel. Since we have this encoding drop down, we should also provide value for this current value to it. Yeah, I think that's what we'll have to do now, because we need to provide this value from Redux state, right? I think it can be just string here, it doesn't matter much. And we will provide this okay, where do we provide this? I wonder. Here as the value, props value, hopefully like this. Input encoding, and now same thing in output panel. Output, yeah, but here it should be output encoding. Let's check now if nothing broke with our tests. Yeah, I think it pretty much should be fine, but let me return it to run all tests instead of just one. Yeah, I think now if we change encoding, it should update properly. Now, yes, if I change encoding, it's updating. Somehow now I can see this label there. I don't know why it was first there, now it's there, but I'm not going to check this now. Okay, it's 1 hour already, So let me just try to add something. To the ReadUser. Okay, here is our ReadUser. So here we are taking UTF-8, but instead we should take actual encoding, which is provided, which is set. So let's try new state, input encoding, and here let us set output encoding, new state, output encoding. Okay, and let's look at what we have now. I'm not sure. Yeah, now it's gonna break. But it should also do this immediately on encoding change. This should happen again, actually. Same thing which happens on text change, where on input received. Same thing should happen on encoding change. So I'll just do it like this. This is the not probably the best way. But okay, let's just leave it at that for today. I think anyway, today I did what has to be done. Let me check what's... Yes, all tests succeed now. Maps $, I think that -5 which I added might be removed now. This label here, because it was actually sticking out from the bottom, I added some top -5 I added, but now it looks like it's not needed. I don't understand what happened and why it's not needed suddenly. This is very weird. I don't even remember where I added it. I think inside encoding drop down. Yeah, here I added it to label. I don't know, I'm just going to remove it. Yeah, now this suddenly looks fine. Okay, so today I didn't have time to complete this AS thing. Tomorrow I will be able to add AS encryptor, so join tomorrow, same time, 10:30 UTC. I don't know what other time zones, but you go figure out. UTC 7:30 time zones. So anyway, 7:30 UTC. This is 3:30 a.m. So probably that's 7:30 p.m. etc. So 7:30 p.m. UTC. This is 3:30 p.m. EST or 12:30 p.m. Pacific time PST. So just join. I'm making streams daily. I think that's it for today. Subscribe if you liked it, and thank you for watching. Bye.